semuanya, Assalamualaikum. Kembali lagi di video reaction saya kali ini guys. Oke, mudah-mudahan semuanya sehat selalu. Nah, kali ini saya mau tengok video pembahasan tentang ini ya, Indonesia ASEAN next superpower. Jadi the next superpower of ASEAN ya, Indonesia. Nah, so jangan lama-lama lagi, mari sama-sama tengok video ini. Let's go.
Indonesia is massive. This is a country that defies descriptions. 18,000 islands, 280 million people, a $1 trillion economy, 700 languages. It stretches 3,200 miles from east to west, a longer distance than from New York City to Los Angeles, longer than from London to Kabul. Indonesia is an entire world to itself, but yet this country is poorly understood and even more so, often ignored. This is a country that is estimated to be the world's fourth largest economy by 2050, and by that point will have 330 million people. It's time the world wakes up to Indonesia's potential. Why is Indonesia so critical to Asia, to the point where it may be Asia's most strategic country? Let's find out today in another episode of Okay Then. Remember to subscribe for more electrifying stories around geopolitics, economics, and tech. Indonesia is immensely vital due to the emerging contest between America and China in the region. For China, managing to get the countries of Southeast Asia to not oppose it and align with it in terms of economic growth and its overall belt and road infrastructure agenda is key. China's near abroad is both East Asia and Southeast Asia. With East Asia, China has a complicated relationship with both South Korea and Japan. Both of these countries are American-aligned states and host American bases. For China, then, not alienating a country like Indonesia is key, as Indonesia is in the midst of the South China Sea region, a region where China has expansive oceanic claims. This has in the past caused issues between Indonesia and China, but the two countries, for the most part, have managed to not escalate the issues. The key then for China is to make the nations of Southeast Asia, if not allies, at least strong economic partners, to trade with China, to serve as consumer markets for China's products, including China's EV cars, and to also serve as massive infrastructural laboratories for China's construction companies. In 2019, Indonesia and China traded $72 billion alone. This is more than the trade Indonesia had with the US, Japan, and India combined. China has moved beyond trade as well with Indonesia and pumped tens of billions into Indonesia's infrastructure. The Chinese-Indonesian relationship is getting so tight that Indonesia decided to opt for China over Japan to construct a high-speed railway on the island of Java, the world's most populated island with 145 million people. This high-speed railway will be completed later this year in 2023. It will connect the two largest cities in Indonesia, making ride times between Jakarta and Bandung 40 minutes, when it previously took 3 hours. China has invested $25 billion in infrastructure in Indonesia in the past decade, and this has helped to trigger the economic boom in Indonesia. Roads, skyscrapers, bridges, airports, and trains have all been part of China's campaign to remake Indonesia. America's relationship with Indonesia is more security-oriented. America has a long relationship with the Indonesian military that dates back to the Suharto era, who was a steadfast American ally. For America, if it can convert the countries of Southeast Asia into military allies who would partner with it in any war against China, it could potentially contain China via a ring of military forces aligned with it against China. In 2022 alone, America signed a $14 billion deal with Indonesia for F-15 fighter jets. America is also closely aligned with Indonesia on Indonesia's ambitions to build a modernized naval force to replace its aging naval vessels. America also hosts an annual military exercise with Indonesia known as Garuda Shield, where the two militaries coordinate together via a series of land, air, and naval simulations. Indonesia, despite both Chinese and American ambitions to turn it into a strong ally, has long been a country known for neutrality and non-alignment. it is unlikely Indonesia will actually choose any sides. Everyone wants Indonesia to align with it because of its geography. Southeast Asia is gradually becoming one of the world's powerhouse regions due to its location between the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. This means that a massive chunk of the world's trade flows through for it one reason or another en route to their destination port. The first is the Malacca Straits. Indonesia controls this with Singapore and Malaysia. This is one of the busiest shipping choke points worldwide. For trade in a given year, over 100,000 vessels travel it. The success of these straits is what drove Singapore to its status as a hyper-rich city-state and made its port one of the world's largest. The Malacca Straits, however, are very shallow, and oftentimes the largest vessels in the world, such as Supermax tankers, cannot navigate it. For those tankers, there are two other choke points in Indonesia for them, in particular, the Lombok and Ambai Straits. Indonesia's fourth choke point, the Sunda Straits between Java and Sumatra, is also relatively narrow like the Malacca Straits. Indonesia's criticality to ocean trade, though, is at times in peril. One of the key challenges for the Indonesian state has always been managing to rule this vast country of 18,000 islands and policing its waterways. Indonesia's navy has not always been up to the task. As a result, Indonesia is host to normally 20% of all the world's piracy incidents in a given year. As trade continues to surge in Asia as a whole as a result of the world's economic orientation moving east, Indonesia will be tasked to resolve this. Beyond the oceans, Indonesia is important due to its centrality for the industries of the future. Under President Joko Widodo, Indonesia has prized itself at being the cutting edge of the future. There is no bigger area where Indonesia has shown this than in electric vehicles. For decades, Thailand was known as the Detroit of Southeast Asia. It has long been the primary automotive manufacturing center of Southeast Asia, largely due to the immense sums of Japanese investment in the country. However, this reputation is increasingly at risk. Indonesia wants to change this, and it is using its huge reserves of nickel deposits. By 2027, it is estimated that 80% of all EV car batteries will use nickel that was first mined in Indonesia. To get ahead of this trend, Indonesia has mandated that no raw nickel can be exported from Indonesia. Indonesia is doing this across a range of its resources, including other EV critical minerals, such as cobalt, bauxite, and tin. The idea is that processed nickel in Indonesia will incentivize creating batteries in Indonesia, which will incentivize manufacturing EV cars themselves. And all of this will be manufactured at large in Indonesia. This strategy does seem to be working. A range of Chinese battery manufacturers are already setting up battery plants in Indonesia. BYD, the world's largest EV manufacturer, has also stated its intent to establish manufacturing in Indonesia. It has already set its first plant in Southeast Asia in Thailand, but it has affirmed that Indonesia will be a massively important market for it. Beyond EVs, Indonesia is home to some of Southeast Asia's fastest-growing tech startups and unicorns. Jakarta is a hub for the region's tech, and the success of companies like Gojek, Tokopedia, and Traveloka will have a great effect on the broader future of Indonesian tech as a whole. Expect more iconic tech companies to emerge from Indonesia in coming years. Whether you consider Indonesia's geopolitics, its maritime legacy, or even its center at the industries of the future, it is clear that it is a strategic country whose decisions and actions will influence the future at large. It will in time be one of the world's largest economies and will be the powerhouse of Southeast Asia, influencing where the region aligns as the world is disrupted across a variety of different contexts. The Indonesian story and how exactly it plays out will be one of the world's most stirring and magnetic narratives in the years to come. That's our deep dive into the new Indonesia. Stick around with OK Then for the story of geopolitics and economics in the 21st century. Don't forget to hit that like button, share, and subscribe for more electrifying stories. Until next.
Oke guys, jadi itulah dia video pembahasannya ini. Jadi Indonesia, Asia next powerful country ya. Jadi berdasarkan perkembangan Indonesia sekarang kan banyak perubahannya gitu ya, banyak yang membangun juga. Bahkan juga diprediksi akan menjadi negara dengan ekonomi terkuat di dunia gitu ya pada tahun 2050. Melihat kepada perkembangannya sekarang lah gitu ya, dengan segala potensi yang sekarang ini kalau kita lihat kan dari segi ekonomi digital, perkembangan teknologinya juga, hilirisasi dan yang lain-lain gitu. Jadi Indonesia memang berpotensi untuk menjadi negara superpower bukan hanya di ASEAN, di dunia juga gitu. So, terima kasih banyak sebab kamu sudah menonton video ini. Jangan lupa macam biasa untuk support channel saya dengan subscribe, like video ini, dan jangan lupa untuk komen juga, oke? Terima kasih banyak dan kita jumpa lagi di video seterusnya. Assalamualaikum.